Hey everyone, hope you guys are enjoying Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak in whichever platform you're choosing to play it on. And today I wanted to host a little bit of a discussion topic, and I think it's one that's been kind of brewing as of late regarding pretty much the whole social media aspect of the game, where people take to social media and give plenty of hot takes for games nowadays. And one of the discussion topics that I've seen pop up the most is that basically, was Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, were they ever good? Were they actually good games? Not just like good Monster Hunter games, but just good games in general. This is a sentiment that I've seen people kind of toss around, like all of a sudden the game's pretty much content is going to dry up in a couple of weeks, and next thing you know, somehow, well, we didn't really get that one specific monster we wanted. Maybe our weapon wasn't really the top tier weapon we expected it to be. Therefore, yeah, the game was bad overall. It was never good. It was always bad. The graphics weren't as good as World. The graphics weren't as good as, Iceborne. Therefore, it was a bad game overall. I always get a good laugh out of those kind of takes, but it does inspire me to kind of want to talk about my own experience with the game and pretty much what I took away from Rise and Sunbreak. So I certainly want to open up the dialogue here. Do let me know in the comments, did you enjoy the game? Did you like it at the end of the day? And ultimately, were you satisfied? Because that is really the biggest takeaway. Were you satisfied? Did it keep you going? Were anomaly investigations enough of a good addition? Was Master Rank successful enough to kind of merit continue to be played? Were the monster roster worthwhile the investment for you to be, happy with? Were the skills, the armor sets, were they good enough? All those kind of things. And I kind of want to have an open dialogue here with that in mind. I want to talk about the story first and foremost, because usually people don't play Monster Hunter games for the story. I certainly never did. I used to skip the, conversations in previous games because I never really actually cared. And it took up until like maybe Generations Ultimate for me to actually get invested into the story in a Monster Hunter game. World a little bit, Iceborne even less or so. But then Rise was somewhat interesting in its own right. But I think Sunbreak did a very good job with the characters that they introduced, doing the whole followers thing. I think they made them meaningful. They weren't just characters that were just sitting back in the town, but they were characters that you could actually bring along with you. They made them relevant. They were interesting. They were quirky, and I enjoyed them quite a bit. The story of the game, at the end of the day, the whole Geismagorm thing, Malzeno thing, whatever, that was fine. It is what it is. But it was interesting and it kept me going. But I think the followers idea and certainly the characters in their own right were good enough, and it helped the story continue along. The monster roster was pretty much, probably for me personally, one of the best we have seen in a Monster Hunter game. Yes, it probably wasn't as many as we would have liked, and yes, Sunbreak did not really add many new monsters at the end of the day. That is certainly a hefty criticism. That is a valid one. Rise introduced a pretty nice chunk of new monsters originally. Post-launch, it added a few more, but then Sunbreak added a bunch of such species, certainly a bunch of returning monsters that people wanted to see. But when it came to new things, there really weren't that many there, except the main ones that we know of. So in that regard, I do think we should feel slightly shortchanged, even for all the praise that would get Rise and Sunbreak. The monster roster, at the very least in the Sunbreak side of things, was a little lacking. Difficulty for me was fine enough as it is. There's always that threshold that Capcom has to waver where, are they doing a good enough job adding, enough difficult quests? Are they adding enough easy enough content for players to be able to have fun with? I think anomaly investigations are good enough. I don't particularly like the grind all that much. I think they could have cut that down probably by around 33%. Certainly a third of that would have made it a little bit easier, and I think it would have kept players going a bit further. Adding special investigations was something magnificent, something that I think people are very happy with. But the amount of players who are actually getting to that tier, top end, true end game content are not many. That is not everyone. Even more of the active players, they're not all doing that type of content. And then for you to be able to actually be able to fight, let's say a special investigation, Great Isuchi, for example, or something like that, you probably have to just do that quest on your own, because you're not going to really find a lot of people doing those type of quests, even though that is instantly a better, more difficult fight than a normal just master on Grady Suchi or even anomaly investigation Grady Suchi. So, you know, things like that simply go by the wayside because of just higher difficulty and how long the grind is. And believe me, it is a hefty grind, and I've talked about this in multiple times, so I do think they have some things to learn from there. When it comes to the weapon and weapon balance, I made a video talking about the weapon tiers and the way, you know, basically Capcom talked about which weapons were the most popular, and the more popular ones, of course, were probably the better weapons at the end of the day. For obvious reasons, people number crunch to figure out which are the best weapons, and those are the weapons that most people stick with. And you know, in typical Monster Hunter fashion, they did a pretty bad job in that. No, there's a gap, a massive gap between, let's say, the top 5 popular weapons to the next 5, let's say 6 through 10, and then the last 3 weapons, no one even wants 3 to 4 weapons, no one even wants to touch them. So it's one of those things where, like, yes, social media will tell you gun lance is amazing and lance is fun, but no one actually wants to play those weapons when you get online. Sure, there's people actually, you know, diehard fans. I've certainly seen some in the comments as of recently talk about it, but in reality, the overwhelming majority of players will just play the most popular weapons and the ones that ease the gameplay. So does Capcom still need to do another, you know, complete rebuild of some of the weapons? Absolutely. Did they do some things right for some of the weapons, like hunting horn, for example? Yes. Bow, certainly. But not every weapon got that kind of love, and others have gone by the wayside, and they certainly need to get touched up. When it comes to armor sets and stuff like that, you know, it is what it is. Skills, certainly we could have needed a couple of more unique skills, and I think they could have done a better job just adding more post-launch content when it comes to actual armor sets. Now that they're introducing Frontiers content, they could have done a better job there, but they just simply didn't. I've talked about them adding layered armors, for example. The quality of life improvements there are fantastic, but you know, it becomes a little bit lacking when you're still just messing around with the same handful of armors, because they do have enough deco slots for you to be able to just max them out as best as possible. Now, curious crafting and all those things, weapon enhancements, all of those were very good, but you know, again, they were very, you know, reliant on you spending the time to be able to get the materials to be able to continually, you know, make use of those systems. The Rampage was an utter failure at the end of the day. I hate to say that. I was a fan of it originally, but at the end of the day, you know, it was a failure. They recognized that, and they dished it completely altogether for Sunbreak. So Rise, something that they clearly introduced as something that they really wanted to focus on, they just instantly ditched by the expansions drop. Switch skills were not good for me. Like, for me personally, they've never been good. For a lot of players, they were never good because you weren't using the weapon that was depending on switch skills. Switch skill swaps also hit that tier of, like, you know, irrelevance pretty quickly. Now, I know some of you guys out there were using weapons that were using them and building specific armor sets for that, and for that I applaud you, but not everyone was. The easiest way to kind of like make the most coziest armor set for you and your playstyle certainly weren't those. So at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think they ever did a great job when it came to that. Now, the online infrastructure and the online play experience, I think it was probably one of the best ones that I've had in any Monster Hunter game, period. Yes, I was playing on the Nintendo Switch, so the majority of the players were playing on the Nintendo Switch. When I tried to play the game on PlayStation and on Xbox, I had a miserable experience because there just weren't that many players doing the content that I wanted to do at that given time, you know, in those consoles. And I do think Capcom once again is shortchanging the audience and the player base by not providing cross-play and cross-saves. Once again, I'll say this and I'll die on this hill until they actually get their act together. Hopefully the next generation game does bring us that very basic feature that almost every game, even Madden, is getting that feature nowadays. And you know, when Madden does it, it's pretty much been, you know, normal for everyone else to do it for now 10 years, and now they're adding it. So what's Capcom's excuse for holding out? It's certainly not the Nintendo Switch online infrastructure, because there's other games that already have crossplay with Switch. So, you know, that wasn't the real big issue. So at the end of the day, for me personally, was Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak good? I would say yes, they were. They were very good. For me personally, I think they were easily now the best Monster Hunter games that I've enjoyed, that I've experienced. But I've never really been, too crazy about all the other entries. For example, for me, Monster Hunter 3 was really good, but it was also really difficult. The true endgame content was very, very difficult. Monster Hunter 4 was fun, but at some point during the endgame experience, I just kind of got burned out and I stopped. Double Cross and Generations Ultimate, pretty much the same thing. There was just a plethora of content, and at some point, I just kept getting burned out. World was better in that regard. It was different. It felt unique. But for me personally, I just never really found the true joy in the end game there. And then Iceborne, I eventually just tapped out of that game completely. So, I wasn't even a content creator, and I was still, at the very least for Monster Hunter, and I was already tapping out in the end game for Iceborne. But then Rise was different. It was fun. It was engaging. It was colorful. The Palamutes were fun. I liked the monsters that were added in. And then Sunbreak made it even better. Yes, I do hope that they would have done a little bit more. Yes, I certainly would have hoped that they would have, made it a bit more balanced at the end of the day with their post-launch content. But for me personally, it's probably the best Monster Hunter game they have done to date. That doesn't really say much since all of them are pretty good in their own right, and everyone has their own opinions as to which one is the best one. And that's why I wanted to have this discussion. So I find it silly when people on social media now are saying, hey, the game's done and over with. Maybe it wasn't all that good after all. No, it was always good. It always will be good. People can jump into this game 5 years in the future and play it, and they'll have a good enough time as it is for even whatever the next game will be. So, I'm sure it won't be that much of an issue, and players will end up, those same players that are criticizing it now will have that same nostalgia like I see nowadays when I see people talk about, like, man, Monster Hunter Dose or 2 or whatever, like, man, someone's like putting up servers up. You guys should go check that out. That's the best game in the series. Like, I believe I saw someone posting recently on social media that someone's putting like private servers for Monster Hunter 3 online for you to be able to play it on PC, which is something that I would like to check out myself once that goes fully live. And it's like players are trying to do those things because they enjoy those games. And I think there's so many players now, especially more now, since Rise and Sunbreak and World and Iceborne had such a massive player base, that there's going to be more players now 5-10 years in the future when the servers are eventually shut down for these games. They will be wanting to play those games, so they will be talking about it and getting, this was my first Monster Hunter game, therefore this is why it was the best one. Kind of like that whole Pokemon thing, right? Everyone's first Pokemon game is certainly the best one, and every other game after that is not as good. So certainly that's the discussion that I wanted to have. I enjoyed the game. I hope you guys did as well. I will continue to cover whatever Monster Hunter news they talk about, and I have a couple of other videos that I have up my sleeve that I haven't necessarily published. But of course, at the end of the day, at this point, other than event quests or anything along those lines, there's just pretty much nothing to cover other than developer details and stuff like that, and of course potential news on what Capcom could do on the next mainline entry. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!